So I've been asked now to talk a little bit more about measuring what matters. And just to give you a little bit of background, as you know, I shared yesterday, I studied finance and then kind of went into the L&D space. And before actually specializing in transfer, I started working in evaluation. So I became a partner with the Kirkpatricks, one of the, most commonly used models in evaluation. Worked very closely with Jim and Wendy Kirkpatrick, now for about close to 15 years, and did loads of different impact studies across the globe, trying to really measure whether training created the desired impact. And that experience and what I've learned through that is what I'm going to try and put now into this session and just give you a few practical ideas on what not to measure and what to measure instead. But let's get you a little bit involved. And for that, I'd like you now to all stand up. You've been sitting way too long, so I'd like you to stand up. Yeah? If you actually use a survey at the end of a training program to gather participant feedback. If you've ever used a survey at the end of a program to gather feedback, just stand. Now, keep standing if your training evaluation survey that you use contains questions about participants' satisfaction with the program. If your training evaluation survey contains questions about participants' confidence to apply what they've learned. If it doesn't include, feel free to sit down. Okay. I see a few more people sitting down, and don't worry, there's no shaming. It's all honestly looking into the mirror. That's good. We see a few people still standing. Now, keep standing if your training evaluation survey also contains questions about possible application/transfer barriers. If you're asking your people about the barriers they think they're going to face in applying, keep standing. If not, sit down. Well, don't feel bad. I was recently at a very big conference in Germany, and I had about 300 people in the room. And by the time I asked this question, there were less people standing than here. So this is good to see. We have a few people still standing, but it's not my last question. Keep standing if your training evaluation survey, that survey that you use at the end of a program, contains questions about the expected business impact. If you still have that, keep standing, and if not, sit down. Good. So we still have a few people who ask about that. Well, I can tell you, you're on the right track. And for everyone else who's now sitting, we're going to change that by the end of this session, because that's what we should do. Now, what I just showed you, and feel free now everyone else to sit as well, but great job for those of you who kept standing till the end. Absolutely appreciate each other. So what I just showed you is kind of the status quo of the industry. Today still, most organizations use an end of the program survey, and typical questions in there are all about, how did you like the training? How satisfied were you with the venue? How satisfied were you with the food? How much did you like the facilitator? And the kind of feedback you get is this kind of stuff about, it was fun. The location was great. Ooh, the slides were beautiful. It was great to get out of office. The trainer was really funny. I love my group. Well, so what? I mean, don't get me wrong, we all like a pat on the shoulder. We all might love that nice feedback at the end of a program where someone tells you, hey, I really enjoyed your session. You were so good. It feels good. But guess what? It doesn't impact transfer. And even worse, it's not the kind of data your senior executives, the ones giving you money for the training, care about. As long as this is what we measure, how are you going to ask for more money? How are you going to justify the investments? Are we in the entertainment business? My husband is an actor. I mean, that might be some useful feedback for him sometimes, that he's funny, that people felt entertained, because that's the business he's in. But if we're in the business, as we just heard before from Dr. Akinna, that we are changing behavior, well, it probably requires more than just a great venue, some good food, and some fun. So, my question though is, and this is by the way, and I know this is really small, but I wanted to show you, this is data I found from a very important magazine. It's the Watershed Measuring the Business Impact of Learning report. And they actually looked over years, what are the different things that are being measured? And right here is learner satisfaction. And as you can see, we are actually today in 2000, I mean this is last year, in 2024 even paying more attention to learning satisfaction than a few years ago. That's kind of scary. So somehow we are talking about that we need to do things differently, but our industry still seems to pay attention to these vanity metrics that actually don't really matter. If you kind of look at it, this is how many people are actually measuring improving on the job application, organizational impact, return on investment, and this is confidence. And so you can see by far, the highest number is in learner satisfaction. And some of the things that we were doing right many years ago, we're actually kind of going backwards because maybe we haven't yet really fully figured out how to do this. So I would say an invitation to you, let's figure it out together. So if we shouldn't kind of measure this satisfaction level, but you know, what instead? And here, by the way, just one other very interesting insight into why this is problematic. I brought you a number, 0.07. I know this is now a very difficult question, but I have a feeling some of you might know the answer. What do you think hides behind this number? Does anyone want to take a guess what this number might be? The title of the slide is Why Satisfaction is a Problem. So what might 0.07 stand for? Anyone done research in this room? Anyone familiar with correlation? It actually stands for the correlation between satisfaction and transfer. 0.07 is a very low correlation. So basically, there's no correlation between satisfaction and application on the job afterwards. So even if you get great feedback, let's say a 5 out of 5 on your feedback scores that people were satisfied with the training, and you think that's great, it is no guarantee at all that people are applying. But there's another thing that's problematic about that, and that is, it sends the wrong signals. It incentivizes the wrong things. There's many organizations I've worked with that measure and they incentivize their trainers by the feedback scores they get. So if a trainer doesn't get a certain feedback score, that trainer cannot keep doing trainings. Now, what is now the motivation of the trainer? To ensure the participants are happy and satisfied. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating that you should create dissatisfied participants, but sometimes in order to learn, we gotta get out of our comfort zone. Someone might need to be able to give us some constructive feedback that might not be so comfortable. Sometimes we have to put people into maybe role plays that they don't fully enjoy, but it's good for their learning. And so by incentivizing trainers with KPIs connected to how much satisfaction they created, we might actually encourage them to not really push the learning. Because all they do is maybe give longer breaks, because that creates satisfied learners. We are putting our investments and our focus on the wrong things, because we are chasing a metric of satisfaction that actually doesn't matter. But in the end of the day, feedback surveys are a great way to collect feedback, especially when you do them right at the end of a session. It's one of the easiest ways to collect training feedback, because you typically get about a 90 to 100% feedback response rate if you do it right at the end of a program. And so that's a lot of data. That's a very, very big opportunity. So I'm not saying say goodbye to feedback forms, but I'm saying we got to think about how to design them differently. And so what should we actually focus on instead if we don't ask questions about satisfaction? Well, what I'm going to show you now is probably going to look familiar. We remember that from yesterday? The 12 levers of transfer effectiveness. Those 12 factors are known to have a very strong impact on transfer. Unlike satisfaction that only has a 0.07 correlation, these factors have a very high correlation. So just imagine a world where in our surveys, we are not asking about satisfaction, but we actually are asking about how relevant a session was. Because if people say it was very relevant, that will give us much more of an indication whether transfer might happen. What if we ask them, did you have enough time to practice the skills? If they all say, no, we didn't, well, that's probably a good indication that transfer might not happen because they were not given enough opportunities. So we can use the 12 levers, not only like I showed yesterday, to do a pre-training analysis of potential barriers. We can use them to evaluate whether our program even has a chance of creating the desired impact. So, just imagine for a moment a world where you could predict learning transfer without having to wait for it to occur. Wouldn't that be amazing? I mean, I don't know about you. What would you say? That would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? Because sometimes impact takes time. And just imagine if you're running a marathon and your goal was to finish that marathon in 4 hours. You only know whether you managed that marathon once you cross the finish line. But what if you then cross it in 4 hours, 10 minutes? It's too late to do anything about it. Opportunity gone. So evaluation, there's a big mindset shift. Evaluation is not a one-time affair that you do at the very end. Evaluation is a constant monitoring and adjusting. As early as at the end of a program, I need to start collecting actionable intelligence and data that tells me whether I can even expect transfer to happen. Because if I then realize, no, I can intervene and take action where needed. So, what does this look like in reality? So this is, and I'll send this to you because it's a little bit small, but this is an example of one of our surveys. So what you can see is, and I read it out to you on some of it, instead of asking these questions around were you satisfied with the training, we ask questions about how relevant was the program. How much opportunity did you have to practice what you learned? Were you given enough time to think about your next steps in applying the learning? All questions related to the 12 levers. If everyone tells me they are not confident, that's great data to have because then I need to do something about it. So I'm also including questions to ask them, why might you not be confident? What barriers to implementation do you maybe see in your job? And again, all I'm having there is things connected to the 12 levers. I'm asking them about, for example, do you have other priorities? Do you think the supervisor will support you? Remember yesterday, we spoke about data analytics and how important it is to have that data to go and influence your stakeholders. Well, that's where you get the data from. Just imagine for a moment at the end of a program, 80% of your participants will tell you, I'm not confident to apply what I've learned because I don't think my supervisor will support. What can you do with that data? Well, you can go and speak to the supervisors. Now it's not you saying, dear supervisor, I want you to support, your people are telling. What if everyone told you at the end of a program, we were not given enough time to practice? Well, now you can go back to the relevant stakeholders and maybe ask for a follow-up session. You can adjust your design. You actually have data to take action. Now, what we've done kind of based on this, and this is just, you're going to get access to this, we collaborated, or we started now to collaborate with a German startup company to put this into an actual tech tool. Because guess what? Evaluation can be very time intensive. Just imagine hundreds of surveys and you need to manually in Excel analyze that. So we created a tool that allows us to do this much faster. And now at the end of every program, I get this. I get this little grid that tells me right up there a predicted impact score. So in this case, 4.64 out of 5 is the predicted impact score. So instead of having a 4.6 or 5 in satisfaction score, I now get a score based on the questions I ask that tells me how likely transfer might happen. Were the conditions for good transfer actually taken care of? And even better, I can see the different factors. So in this program, I can see expectation setting score much lower than everything else. Now I can go and do some root cause analysis. What happened here? And in this program, we realized it was a program where the information about what this program was about and what to expect was not sent out to everyone. So there were a lot of people in the room that didn't know why they were there. Now we know what went wrong and we can correct that for the next time. So this is what I call collect actionable intelligence. Because with that, I can go back and take action. If everyone tells me the content was not relevant, well, then I can go back to my instructional designer and say, hey, look, I think we got to do some more talking with the subject experts to find out how to make this relevant. So message is very clear. Stop chasing a vanity metric of satisfaction because it has no correlation to transfer. Use an existing tool like surveys. Just modify the questions to actually ask questions that give you data that you can use. This requires a change, though, in attitude as well. We just heard before that's hard. A lot of clients I work with, they get very nervous about that. Because what if you find out something is not good? What if you actually find out at the end of a program that the content was not relevant or they didn't have enough practice opportunities? Ooh, now I got negative feedback. No, you got good feedback because you got feedback that you can work with and actually drive change. But that's a mindset shift. You actually need to really want to find out the truth. And I can tell you a lot of organizations don't want that. I truly believe evaluation, the problem in evaluation is not that we don't have the systems in place and the skills, it's a mindset. We are scared to find out that what we designed doesn't work. Let go of that mindset. It's great to find out that a training didn't work, because then you can correct it for the next time, instead of doing the same mistake over and over. So, but one-time evaluation is not enough, isn't it? I mean, only doing a survey at the end of a program, that's a great first step to predict impact and know whether we are on the right track. But we gotta think about what happens in the future. So here is, again, the same format. One of our favorite ways, again, is we do a survey. 60 days after a program, same mechanism, just a few slightly different questions. We ask people to tell us their development. And we ask them, now 60 days later, think about how often were you doing a certain thing? You know, let's say the transfer goals we discussed yesterday. Let's assume it was a program on sales and we actually wanted them to start using so-called closing techniques. That was the objective. Now 60 days later, I can ask people, if you think back, how often were you using these closing techniques before attending the training? How often are you using them now? The change in that is your transfer success. Maybe before the training, they said it was a 4, and now it's a 6. It's maybe not perfect yet, but that's an improvement of 2 points. And that's what you can show we are on track. People have started to use. And again, of course, if people are still not using it a lot, you again want to ask the question, what's holding you back from using it? Why are you not using the new skills more than expected? Again, the same questions around barriers. Oh, I have other priorities. Oh, my supervisor is not supporting. Again, evaluation is not just finding out whether something happens. It's also about finding out why it might not happen so that you can take action on it. Very, very crucial. And again, the same thing then if I look at it digitally, what I can get, so this is the tool we use, Travado, that we are working on. I can then get again a score. Based on the questions I'm asking, how many people are actually using the skills and applying, again, I get a learning transfer score. I can also ask them about the impact they are seeing, get an impact score. So what we need to work on, we gotta ask the right questions so that we get the data that allows us not just to demonstrate impact, but to take action to get there. And I know I keep saying this a lot. I think in my next life, I actually wanted to be an FBI agent, like where you go and do like research, you look for clues. That's what evaluation is. Evaluation, you kind of have to be a little bit of a geek. You have to be a little bit of a data geek and kind of digging into data. Why is it not working? So that you can take action on it. So, one big challenge remains. And that is, how many of you have tried this, that you send people a survey, let's say 30, 60, 90 days later? What happens to the response rate? Yeah, and that is a big challenge because we need that feedback. Surveys are a very easy way to collect feedback. They are cheap. So here are a couple of ideas for more follow-up survey responses that have worked very well for us. One thing we do is we actually send people a physical card, like a postcard with a QR code, inviting them. So they kind of feel they're getting something personal in their mailbox. They look at it and then it kind of encourages them to fill it out. We kind of organize follow-up sessions, the session where we do the certificate of implementation. And then we actually have them right in the room again and we can ask about the survey. And we don't allow them, we put a bouncer at the door, not allowing them to exit before they have completed it. We combine it with a job aid. We tell them, if you fill up these questions at the end, you can download a job aid, something that's useful for them, something that will help you do your job better. So you encourage them with the WIFM. You get access to a video series. You get something in return. Sometimes we also just schedule interview groups. Instead of doing the survey, we actually schedule a meeting for people to come together. We get the leadership team. Again, it's all back to the business. We ask the business leaders, can you send the message? It's a very different message when the leaders of the organization send an email and say, hey, dear Sandra, you've attended this program 60 days ago. I really care about whether you are seeing impact. Can you please take 5 minutes to answer a few questions? Versus me as HR L&D sending it. So again, sometimes leveraging the business, the direct supervisors can really help. And then also, very important, make sure you send it to them in their preferred communication channel. I know this sounds very simple, but if you know people already have way too many emails, don't send it via email because it's not going to get the attention. If people are a lot on the go and they're much more on WhatsApp, send it on WhatsApp. If every day they use MS Teams, send it on MS Teams. Make it easy for them to access it. But good evaluation is more than a survey. Good evaluation, this is a key principle in the Kirkpatrick methodology, is blended evaluation. And blended evaluation is a methodology where, just like in good journalism, just think about a good journalist. A good journalist is not just going to write an article based on one interview with one person. That would be very subjective, biased data. We want to make sure we use multiple sources, meaning we get feedback from participants, from managers, possibly system usage, business outcomes. Like we kind of have to look at multiple sources, but also multiple methods. Combining a survey with observation or with kind of mystery shopping with all kinds of other things is what gives us much more objective data. Because let's face it, participant data is subjective. Participants will always rate themselves slightly higher. We all overestimate our capabilities. On the other hand, the managers very often rate it slightly more negative. The truth is probably somewhere in between. So using multiple data sources and methods reduces the risk of data bias. So now I've spoken about surveys for quite some time. So what are some of these other ideas? And I'm actually very lucky we can go through this pretty fast and then do a little case study together to get into some active practice and get you to apply all of this. Because yesterday, one of our speakers has shared some of this already. But here are some of our favorite ways to evaluate transfer effectiveness beyond surveys. So, for example, one could be a self-assessment and supervisor assessment, so kind of a 360, where you're inviting them in a conversation. But it could also be that you actually just ask the supervisors to give you qualitative feedback on what they have observed in the change in behavior. It's a little bit time-consuming, but highly important, because again, you're engaging the supervisors. Another way to do it is the implementation presentation, where you, by the way, then also give the certificate of implementation, so you can leverage that. Another one is completion of practical projects. Again, similar, you actually use that as a way to gauge whether people are using the learning. And another one is external observation, mystery shoppers. I used to be a mystery shopper as a student to earn some money, where I would go into restaurants and hotels to observe whether the staff was doing certain things right. It still exists in a lot of call centers where you have mystery people listening into the calls, but you could also do that. Let's say you want people, to do certain things. You could go into a meeting as a mystery. I still see that in airlines being practiced, where sometimes they have mystery flyers to kind of observe the behavior. In some industry, that makes a lot of sense. So again, in evaluation, yes, you've got to be a little bit of a data geek. You can actually also get very creative and incorporate evaluation in your post-program design follow-up activities. Because you're probably already doing follow-up sessions, you're doing projects. That's all an opportunity to gather data to supplement your surveys. But then there's one last thing, and that is, in the end of the day, there will be that business leader that says, well, all this data, it's a little bit qualitative, all of that might be a little bit biased, I want the hardcore business data. And actually, in the end of the day, the best way to really have proof whether transfer did happen is to see it in relevant business metrics. And just before Dr. Akin said, not all programs are created equal, all training is created equal, the same is true for evaluation. You cannot use the same metrics for every program. Every program is born differently, meaning it has a different business need behind it. Based on that business need, you can define what we call so-called leading indicators. Those are short-term, mid-term milestones that tell you something is on track. Because sometimes the final result, let's say that marathon we are running, the 4 hours is far away. But if I set myself a goal for where do I need to be at 5K, at 10K, at 15K, I can monitor and adjust. So those are typically short-term goals that are very closely connected to what the person is doing differently. I'll give you an example and then we do a case study together to wrap this up and give some active practice. Sometimes you want to improve sales, but sales is very far away and there's many other factors impacting sales. But if you send people to a training on, let's say, where they're learning how to use closing techniques, one thing that you should see very quickly improve is the closure rate, the number of proposals that get accepted. You're sending people to a training on customer service. Improving customer satisfaction might take time. But if you're teaching them how to better handle complaints, a short-term metric might be that you should see very quickly a reduction in the number of complaints. And that ultimately at one point will impact satisfaction. So let's practice this together. And I think let's try whether the video works.
Justin Financial Services is a US-based.
So I'm going to show it, and you're going to hear a video and see it or listen to it. This is a case study of a true client of us where they share with you the actual need for a training. Based on what you hear, I want you to think about, for this particular training, what would be some of those KPIs, leading indicators, that you could pay attention to that will tell you whether your training is starting to have the desired impact. So listen carefully, and we'll see and launch the video if it works.
Justin Financial Services is a US-based accounting firm. The corporate tax division provides top quality tax service to large and mid-sized business customers. The previous 2 years showed a decrease in overall business results due to lost customers. There had also showed a decrease in overall business results due to lost customers. There had also been a higher than normal Justin employee turnover caused by frustration with the actual work and excessive pressure from supervisors. Human Resources interviewed some accountants and supervisors and discovered that the turnover resulted in heavy workloads for the remaining team members. In an effort to complete the large volume of work, corners were being cut and mistakes were being made. This was leading, at least in part, to client dissatisfaction and reduction in business. The CEO has requested training to increase sales and decrease employee turnover. The training department created a strong argument that adherence to key business processes would alleviate the workload issue, which in turn would correct the turnover problem.
So, perfect. I have it here written down as well for you. Once more, just have a look at it and take 2 minutes on your table. If this is the business case, what do you think are some of the leading indicators that we should pay attention to that will tell us whether our training has started to create the desired impact? What are some of those strategic KPIs that matter in this case? Just have a brief conversation on your tables to practice this before I'll show you the solution.
Are people still reading? Oh, you're okay. Before I start discussing, okay. Melanie, maybe we'll give them more than 2 minutes. They're still reading it.
The reading is the same as in the video. It's just a summary. And of course, those of you joining us virtually, feel free to put it into the chat. You can always share in the chat function on the virtual session. What leading indicators would you be paying attention to? Who has an idea? Who would like to share what is one metric you will pay attention to? What is something that we should see that improves as a result of this training?
Well, in this country or on this table, as the case may be, in this case, we think what we should be looking at is the process in implementation. The process is already in place. It is not being implemented. So, it's not about training, it's about process. It's an operations thing, not a training thing.
Well, we did find out, so just to context, there was a problem with not understanding the process, and hence they were trained on it. But I would absolutely agree with you. One of the very short-term indicators that you could pay attention to is, are we seeing an improvement in the adherence to the process? Because guess what? They shared with you, that people are not following the process. So clearly, we are measuring that already. That's the baseline data before the training. People are not following the process. So what should we see? We should see an improvement in how many people are following the process. Absolutely.
Supervisor support is not there also, because even if you work in a high-pressured environment, if you have a supervisor that is empathetic to you, that understands and listens, it can help to ameliorate, the challenge and all. So I think the supervisor support is not adequate and it should be worked on.
So that's another part of the solution we need. But if we implement all of that, how will we know that what we implemented works? What is the first thing that we should see change? The workload should reduce. No, they've been telling there's too much workload. What else?
Increase in productivity as well.
Could be one. There's a few more short-term ones.
Customer satisfaction.
Ultimately, the customer satisfaction, but what is required to get to that higher customer satisfaction?
Reduction in the attrition rate.
Loss of customers will reduce.
Now, I'll help you a little bit. Why are they losing customers? What is being done? Yeah.
Say something. Okay, hi, my name is Ada. So one of the things they can also do is to automate their business processes. Automation of their business processes,
Yeah.
that will also reduce the workload.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that we had one is the adherence to the process.
To reduce the error rate.
The very first thing that we should see, if people are actually implementing what they've learned, we should see a reduction in the errors. That is something that you can very clearly correlate to your training initiative. It's very hard to correlate training to these really long-term goals. Yes, it has an impact on it, but you gotta build your chain of evidence. Well done, yeah? So that is very much the error rate, yeah? So I had it here as well. It's the increase in number of correctly filed tax returns. We make less errors, so we will see more correctly filled tax return forms. That means we have less customer complaints, but it also means we have less workload because we have to do less of the rework, which means the workload goes down, we are less stressed, and then that will have an impact on the employee satisfaction. So this is really key. So you can see here a few of them that we've listed. There can be more, but this is key. If there's no better way to measure and prove that transfer has happened than linking it to very short-term business metrics that are directly connected. And what that requires, again, is just a good conversation with the business. Why are we doing this program? What is currently happening? Why do you think people need this? Well, they're making errors. You're tracking errors. You have an error tracking metric? Great. Then let's track that after the training, whether it actually improved. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, as Sandra and I always say. Leading indicators exist in the organization. They are being measured. The business measures all kinds of stuff. All you need to do is correlate it with your training and agree with your stakeholders. That's what we call return on expectations. Spoke about it yesterday. It's not always return on investments. I'm very honest with you. In my 15 years of doing evaluation, I've not been once asked to prove return on investment, but I've been always asked to prove return on expectations. Because investment, very often, the training need is more than a monetary need. Yes, ultimately, it's the bottom line and all of that, but every smart CEO knows that training alone is not going to have an impact on that bottom line. Training will be a part of it. But training can directly impact some of these problems that we identified. Remember what I said yesterday? Fall in love with the problem. Find out what the problem is. The problem is too many errors. Okay, then we'll measure whether these errors are going to go down. Too many customer complaints. Well, we'll pay attention to that. Too much of a high attrition rate. Then let's look at that. We got to link it. The metrics will be different for every program. And so to wrap this up, what this means is your surveys need to be different for every program. How many of you are using the same survey for all your programs? Say goodbye to that. Because you actually need to customize your survey. There are some standard questions you can ask, but then, for example, you can add a question about the business impact. Look at this. At the end of a program, right at the end, you can ask a question. I believe I will see an impact in the following strategically relevant areas as I apply what I've learned in this training. And what you list there are, of course, the KPIs that you agreed with the business. So in the Justin financial case, instead of turnover, we would have there error rate. Instead of closure rate, we would have customer complaints. If you've done that work beforehand, you can use that in your survey. And that's a great first step to prove your impact. But of course, you want to have real proof. You can then also, 60 days after, in your survey, add a question and ask your participants to tell you, where have they started to see the impact? Are they starting to see an impact on those critical business metrics? Again, remember blended evaluation. This is not proof, but it's a first indication. If all your participants say, I'm starting to see a reduction of errors, but your error rate is actually not reducing, there might be another issue that you then need to analyze. Yeah? So, level 4, as we call it in Kirkpatrick evaluation, is the easiest of all the levels. It's just the hardest to correlate to the business and to the training and to identify, because you can't do it in isolation. Measuring it is the easiest because it's already measured. Every organization tracks these KPIs already. The business does. You just need to get access to it as an L&D leader. You need to have the conversation and speak to them. So if we do this training, what strategic business metrics, leading indicators, KPIs will tell you that we are seeing the impact we want? What should we pay attention to? You got to partner with the business to establish that. So, with that, my 4 key tips to wrap it up. Number 1, I told you you're going to say goodbye to something. Yesterday we said goodbye to... Exactly. Now you're going to say goodbye happy sheets. No more questions about satisfaction. And you're going to say hello to transfer relevant feedback forms. Feedback forms that ask about confidence to apply, barriers to apply, and possible impact on the business. You don't, oops, that should be number 2, but it's number 3. We're going to go in chaos here, a little bit like the traffic here or in India, left and right, you just overtake. So number 3 says, don't fly blind, monitor and adjust your initiatives. We use a blended evaluation approach. Don't only rely on one source because they are biased. The more sources, methods you use, the stronger your chain of evidence and your credibility. Because different stakeholders will like different stories. Some stakeholders want qualitative, others want quantitative, others want the business metric. You gotta leverage that. And then last but not least, actually very important, agree on leading indicators with the business before a program, and then use them to track progress, and very importantly, update your stakeholders on the progress.